A lot of people think that I stole the company from you. I logged you out, I changed the password, I hacked your email, and I never looked back.
It just happened so fast.
This whole brand was built off of...
There's credit due for me kind of inspiring the movement.
Okay, this is 7 to 10 years overdue. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
There's so many places we get to go in this interview, but I first want to start with, what is your Bossbabe origin story?
Well, first of all, before I go into that, I just want to say I don't think anyone has seen us in the same room together, which is funny. So here we are. Okay, my Bossbabe origin story. Early 20s, like too early. Like I don't know anything about life, 21, 22, fresh out of high school. Immense pressure to go to school, to go to college. Both of my parents are college educated. It was kind of like the expectation, but they weren't paying for it. And so I was like, well, how am I going to pay for it? I don't have the money. And so I did what any millennial would do, which is Google, like, is college a scam? And it turns out Google said yes. And I was like, you know, I've always been an internet girl, grew up on the internet and had like a dad who's early adopter. So I knew that the internet was an avenue to make a lot of money. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to go to school. Maybe I'll start a business. But also I'm 21, 22, and I just want to be like famous. Like I want to be a reality star. So this is what's cooking up. And I already have a chronic social media addiction. I'm on Twitter. I would cut high school classes to just go home and be on Twitter. And one day I signed up for a TV host seminar on how to become like a host, like a TV host. And I was living in the Bay Area at the time. I took like a $2 bus to LA, one of those like mega buses that you can take with a bunch of other sad souls. And I get to this. Now that I look at it, it was like a super tacky seminar, but like, I'm so excited. She has pictures of her and Khloe Kardashian on the wall. I'm like, this is it. I'm going to be a star. It's all about how to get on TV, if you can believe that. So like at this time, I'm like, how do I get on TV? I'm watching Bad Girls Club. I'm watching, you know, MTV, BT, like, how do I, you know, get on the big screen? And so this lady, she's like, hey, so, you know, if you want to get on like Ellen or if you want to get on a big show, like you have to start with social media. This was 2013. And I'm like, social media, like I'm on social media all day long, but none of us are picking up on the fact that everything's about to go to social media. At the time, social media is still just for internet kids and just like kids. So I'm like, okay. She's like, yeah, I have a client who she just started posting about relatable things of being a mom. And now she's getting invited on Ellen and this and that. And I'm like, relatable things. I'm like, what's relatable for me? And it was that moment. I said, well, what's happening right now? And I said, girls are not going to want to change how they dress to be taken seriously in a professional setting. Like millennial women are coming into the workforce. We're coming out of college. We're coming, you know, into professional settings. And I know we're going to want to keep the pink hair and the bright lipstick because that's what we were wearing at that time. And I was like, that's it. It's Bossbabe. So before I even got home, I'm in the bus, like posting quotes, just motivational quotes. And the account started growing. And then like that's kind of where, you know, the rest was history.
But it wasn't motivational quotes. It was the start of what is now what everyone copies to be viral. Because motivational quotes at the time, I talk about this, it was men in suits.
Right.
And it was like very professional quotes and they were about motivating, you know, get up, do the thing.
Yeah.
Your quotes were never that. Your quotes were sassy. They were tongue in cheek. And the way I always describe it, and it's like the best way to go viral, which we know now, you couldn't have known this back yet, maybe you did. When someone shares a post like that, they're basically saying, this is what I want to say without saying it. And that's what you were doing. So how did you even think to do that?
I don't know. I was tapped into the zeitgeist, and that's just been something that's my thing. Like you're right in the sense that they weren't just dry motivational guy quotes, which still go around. And that's another thing I do say too, is like there were motivational accounts, but they all had lions and Lamborghinis and none of them had lipstick and heels. And so the quotes were definitely you know, they were bossy, they were sassy, and they weren't just like pure business. It was like, make each hair flip fabulous, you know, or like stress doesn't go with my outfit. So I see what you mean with that.
And no one was doing that at the time. So you just thought, I'm going to just try this?
Yeah.
And how quickly until you noticed? So you started at bossbabe.inc.
Yeah.
And how quickly until you started to see some traction?
That's a good question. So I remember it was 100 followers the first day, 200 followers the second day, and so on and so forth. And I remember thinking when it got to 500, I remember like, I cannot believe there are 500 women who feel like this. And I just kept going. And, you know, another thing I think people don't realize is Instagram was a whole different place in 2013. So getting 100 followers in a day, I mean, it's still hard to grow now, but I don't know. It was just, there was something about how highly engaged the community was and the page was at that time that like everyone felt it was like a Spitfire page.
And so then as it started growing, the movement started growing.
Yeah. Like, there were fanatics. We were all fanatics. Like, it wasn't just like nowadays there's how many inspirational pink boss quotes for women.
Oh, yes.
Like, I mean, it's like countless. But at the time, there wasn't any. And so, yeah, the girls were reposting and just really like clinging to this identity was giving them purpose. There are so many women who follow me today that have like surpassed the 1 million mark that at the time were just like young girls, and like they look at me now and they're like, oh my God, like, you know, I remember I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for some of those quotes. And it's just kind of crazy to see how influential it was on so many like successful women today.
And when did you start to feel like this is a movement that I really want to lean into and make into something?
So at the time, I was doing a combination of social media freelancing and babysitting. And I remember just, I think, again, what a lot of people don't realize is social media was not a thing. So even offering like social media marketing services for a company, you had to explain why it would be valuable. And there was just so much culture clashing, age clashing, and like now how we have like the young Gen Zer who just gets TikTok or whatever. That was me. It was like, oh, she just gets Twitter. Like, I don't know, just hand her the phone and she'll help the company grow. But I was also babysitting at the time. And I think, you know, I just remember car rides home where I would be blasting Beyonce's self-titled album, which came out. That album and Bossbabe go hand in hand. And I don't know, I just felt I was in it with everyone. So I think that's what made it just such an emotionally strong brand.
And when did you start to make money from it?
That's another good question. Okay, so I'll never forget this. So the baby's asleep and I have some time to think about how am I going to make money from this brand? People are already inundating the DMs and where's the t-shirt? Where's the mug? Like, I'm like, I'm 22. Like, hold on. And I'm like, it's crazy to me. Even at that age, I'm like, I'm not going to just do t-shirts because I'm like, I need recurring revenue. This is what I'm thinking. Mind you, I don't even think New York Times had like a digital subscription yet or like was really pushing that. Like digital subscriptions were not a thing, but I think it was because I was exposed to just the internet. I was just like, because at first I was like, well, maybe I can ship something monthly. And then I was like, that's going to be too much work. I'm like, I can give these girls value by giving them a digital monthly goodie, basically. And at the time, the page had only 30,000 followers. And I'm like, oh, I'm rich. Like, I can do anything with this. If I even just get 1%. And so I would say it was about 6-ish months in that I built the first website from scratch. No Canva, no whatever, a million softwares they have now. Like, I'm literally coding in membership features. Like, there's no membership software.
Yep. Oh, I remember this. The bossbabe.me site.
Yeah,
I remember this.
I'm talking to developers at 1 a.m. from like Freelancer at the time. I don't think there was like Upwork, or maybe Freelancer bought Upwork or something like that. How do I fix this? And like, but we got it cranking and we started something.
It's so fascinating going back to that time too, because I was just talking to my team the other day when we were talking about this episode, and it's so interesting because a lot of people now, when they start these quote pages, you'll see that no matter what design we put on the Bossbabe page, they're going to copy it. And they like go so far beyond to copy it, and it's like extravagant, and they bring in designers. This whole brand was built off of, remember Word Swag, and
Shout
just
out to Word Swag. They follow me on Instagram.
do they?
Yeah,
and
they like all my
figuring it
posts.
out on the back end, like there was, like you say, there was no Canva. Photoshop was available, but it wasn't like you could just YouTube how to use Photoshop. Like this was,
hell no.
This was such a different time, which yes, only 10 years ago in tech is a long time ago.
Yeah.
I remember, all of this. So 6 months in, you started Bossbabe.me. How far between starting that and meeting me was it? Did you meet me through me coming through one of your courses?
Probably.
Because you had Bossbabe.me, but you also had Millennial Rich Girl.
Yeah.
And I think I was in both. Is that how we met?
Probably. Yeah. Because I remember that, so a few years in at this point, the brand is still busting. I'm meeting people. I'm like getting clout now. Like now I'm getting lit. People are like, wow, that's the girl with 200K followers. And I'm like, And yeah, I want to say that I was keeping an eye out on who was hyper engaged because I was looking for, it was getting to the point now I was like, okay, how can I take some of the load off of me? Because, you know, everything was changing and I was starting to like grow up and like actually question, what do I want to do in my life? Because the other thing too is like, I built this company out of survival. Like it was really like, I don't know how I'm going to eat. Like how do, so it wasn't until a few years in that I started having the luxury of being like, who am I? What am I interested in? What would I be doing if I had some level of stability, which is what I was able to create for myself through Bossbabe. So
what I remember, and I don't know if I've got the full version of events right. So you also might need to correct me. So what I remember is you were very much the face. Periscope came out. I remember you saying this is going to be really big. Like you had got on it early. We were seeing those numbers. It was like, it felt like Clubhouse almost.
Yeah.
Started getting really big. And I remember you invited me and was there 4 other girls. And you had said, I want more faces. I don't want this to just be about me. And we all did, I think it was 1 Periscope a week.
Yes.
Something like that.
Yes, exactly. So growing up inspired by the Spice Girls, I always was like, I would love if there was like a girl gang, multiracial, different points of view, representing, in this case, Bossbabe, so that, whatever. I just was always inspired by that idea. And so, yeah, I guess I forgot how much I was so bullish on Periscope. But we'll see where that went. But what I really was bullish on was live. Like it was the first time you could like go live in that way. And so to this day, so many of my followers found me through Periscope. And there's just something about live that's just hits different when it comes to audience building. So another interesting influence that's happening at this time is I'm in the Bay and I'm dating like tech bros and just I'm in the tech scene. So I'm hanging out with people who've raised millions for their company. And it's so funny because one of the first things I realized, they were like, your company's making money. And I'm like, yours isn't. Like, I didn't understand how VC worked at the time. I'm like, I get it. Like you have the t-shirt and the slides, but like, where's the money? And so it was an interesting dynamic because they took some stuff from me. I took some stuff from them. A few ideas that came to mind were, one, operationalizing the business. I had never thought of that. I'm like, yeah, like how do I take myself out of the business so I'm above it as opposed to in it? And that was one of the strategies to do that, as well as just thinking about an acquisition and getting out of it. So that was why I decided to do that strategy with Periscope.
And then how did that go from us 5 doing Periscope to you eventually asking me to be CEO?
Yeah, so you were such an amazing leader in that group and the content was on point. I felt like the engagement was high. And I think another thing people don't realize about us is like, you're the hard worker. I'm more just like, I made the brand, bye. Like, I'm way more of a like investor type chairman, if you will. Like, I'm not necessarily going in there and like solving problems. You're coming to me like, hey, I really think this would be cool. And that
I
would
was
be cool.
a hustler.
Yes, you still are. And that was very apparent. And you were also like coming up. And so I'm thinking this might be a great fit. Like I have this great platform. She can get all this exposure. She can become an authority. And so I proposed the idea, like, how would you like to be onboarded as CEO? And that was how that relationship started.
It was amazing. And I think in the beginning, there was never like, let's do it for salary. Let's have a contract, formal. It was like, come on board. You can take a profit share, run with it, and report into me. And I was like, okay.
That part.
Yeah. Was I 23, 24?
We're like 5. Like, let's just make this money. And
totally. We were both so young. I think it was 2016. No.
Yeah,
2016. 2016. And I literally remember where I was when I got the text, because I absolutely loved the account, and I had started my own called The Confidential, and I was doing very similar in my own vibe, but doing very similar, that viral style. And I was so bullish on the internet world. I was like, digital marketing, I'm going to learn everything I could about it. And I remember when you got this text, I just felt like I manifested this. Like I was so young. I didn't need the contract. I didn't need this. It was like, wait, I get paid. I was like, I get paid as much as I work. I can outwork anyone. And I remember just like from day one, just jumping in and running with it. And it felt like you were like, yeah, bring ideas. Like, let's just run with it.
Yeah, I knew that I wasn't doing as much as I could with it. And so what's happening in my world at the time is I'm starting to get freaked out by the internet. Like, first of all, like what I said about the fanatics. So it went from like, yay, we're all fanatics, to like, I could sense that the movement was going to spin out of like the original vision I had for it, because the internet is just so massive. And I could also sense you were like, bring it on. And I was kind of like, wait, let me figure out what I want from life. And I'm getting uncomfortable with how Instagram is taking over everything. Like, again, I went into it thinking like, oh my God, it'd be so cool to get paid through Instagram. And now I'm like trying to figure out any possible way to not get paid, not have to be on Instagram to get paid. But like, I'm seeing how people are changing. People treat me differently because I have the Instagram clout. Now everything's becoming about Instagram clout. Like, now it's so normal in Miami for people to be like, oh, you want to bring your friends, send the IG page. But like, that was the beginning of that. Like, who are you? And it doesn't matter who you are. Who are you on IG?
Yeah.
And I was like, is anyone going to talk about how like weird this is? And like, is anyone going to talk about the negative effects of social media and technology, and like the way we're designing and adopting the tech? And I was like, I think I want to talk about that. It was weird because I'm coming from pink boss land, and I was I was insecure. I'm young and still unsure of myself. Like, is this going to be okay to do, to start talking about like essentially just tech philosophy?
And how was that for you then to release control to me? Because I've tried. I've never been able to do that.
It's the best thing ever. It's the best thing ever. And I know a lot of business owners struggle with that. And look, everyone's gonna bitch, people bitch. People are like, well, what about you? And don't you want to be more involved? And I was just like, I had to put my piece first. And I had to accept that even if I were to do something differently, doesn't mean she's not getting the job done. Like, you were getting the job done and the numbers were coming in. So I was like, that's all I got, folks. Like, I'm not going to compromise myself even more, to try to like make everyone else happy and like put myself last.
And then I remember again where I was when the acquisition conversation started. Do you remember that for you?
Where I was?
Or just like when those conversations started?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And how did you feel with that started to be put on the table? Was that something that you'd always thought about? Because for me, when I first said yes to this, it was never in my mind. But then eventually, as I started doing it, I was so ambitious, and I thought, you know what? I really feel like I could do something.
You were like, she's not doing shit. I'm gonna take this company over. No, that's how I tell the story.
Yeah,
I'm literally just an absentee owner, pretty much at this point. I'm not really doing anything. I'm not involved, and I'm also building my personal brand in this direction of talking about economics, and like I needed a pink detox.
She's back.
You ever need to go through one of those? I don't know. I sometimes, and this is a whole thing, but sometimes I'll pink myself out. But you know what? Those eras came from feeling like there needs to be some sort of shame affiliated with pink, because pink represents, you know, just you're honoring your girly girl self, your hyper feminine self, and how if you ever want to go anywhere in life, you better get rid of all that shit. And so because Bossbabe was like kind of spiraling out of control, and the movement, I'll say, not the business, the movement, I was like, I didn't want anything pink on my page for like 5 days. And I didn't even want people to put the 2 and 2 together, because I was afraid that they wouldn't like, they'd be like, oh, you're just the Bossbabe girl. Which now I'm like, yeah, that's freaking iconic. But, you know, at the time.
I remember that. I remember when you were really starting your personal brand, and I remember monochrome. I remember it being so different to Bossbabe. Yeah. And then I feel like you did get quite private. Mm-hmm. Was that intentional?
Are you talking about like recently when I just disappeared?
No, I mean, even back then, I feel like I was kind of just like, I'm going to share every single detail.
Yeah.
I'm like, I remember you, maybe I had a different perception. I remember you being very boundaried around social. Like, even though we were in business together, I didn't really know tons about you. You were very private with us, but then also with Instagram.
Yeah.
It was always like this elusiveness about you. Like, what does she do? Like, what is she working on?
I feel like artists like to just go in that mode of like, you know, I have nothing to say, and that says it all. And I go through those phases, because sometimes I do really feel like that. But yeah, I guess it was my way of like coping with and dealing with like the identity crisis that I've been having for 7 years.
That makes sense. Okay, so then acquisition. Let's talk about it, because a lot of people think that I stole the company from you.
First of all, anyone who knows me knows that I would never let anyone steal my company from me. It's, first of all, can anyone even do that? I mean, people have tried to.
Trust me, there's some rumors out there about me too. I don't think it's possible to do something like that.
So let's clear the air, because one thing about me is I'm not like a pushover. Like, how would that even happen? Like, people think like one day I was just like, you know, like you just stole the account or
just logged you out, Alex. I logged you out. I changed the password. I hacked your email, and I never looked back.
Everyone needs to know that Natalie got me a huge check. Okay, Natalie paid me to get out, and I wanted to get out. That's part of how the arrangement worked. So yeah,
that check. Oh my God. I had to borrow money. We had to go on an agreement where I was going to pay you monthly. I remember being confident. Let's first talk about the deal.
Yeah.
So we were both 24, 25, and we were having phone calls. And I've done a lot of business deals since then. This was easy. In a sense of there was so much respect. I feel like I had so much respect for you, and you had so much respect for me. We had so much respect for the brand.
Yeah.
Our conversations were just, here's what I think is fair. Here's what I feel like I could maybe do. And we just got to a point where we both was like, okay.
I mean, here's why I think it was easy. First of all, it's always easier to sell a business when the seller wants out. And so I was a distressed owner. Usually a distressed owner is like a 55-year-old retired person who's been doing it for 30 years and doesn't want to see the business again. But I was, 24-year-old who got a lot of success really early and just never even had a chance to like think. And so if I'm not mistaken, I want to say it was like your idea. Like, you planted the seed, because again, the way I see it is like you're doing all the work and you're growing it, and you're like, wait, I should probably have some equity in this motherfucker.
Yeah.
And I'm like, you're right. And I don't really have any plans for this. And I know whatever plans you have are bigger. And I want to go be an artist in the corner over here in Brooklyn in Prospect Park. Like, how much you got? Let's work it out. And so I think that's why it was a great deal.
Yeah. So for me, I felt really confident in where I wanted to take the brand, but I had no money. I had absolutely no money. And so I remember I lent some money from Steven. We'd agreed on a payment plan, and then I brought in a co-founder to help me do it. Mm-hmm. Which in hindsight also, I wish I'd also, not to say that I'm so grateful in the way that things unfolded, but I wish I knew that there were like different options for buying a business.
Yeah.
I didn't know you could get financing. I didn't know that there were other options for buying a business. It was almost like, oh, you can only pay what you can afford, or you go in debt or whatever it was, or you have to give equity up. Like, I just didn't fully understand. I'm sure you didn't either, but
yeah,
that was a big learning for me.
the fact that we did that before 25 is insane.
It's insane.
It's insane. That is
it's crazy.
Insane.
What did getting money like that at that age feel like?
Great. Well, you know, it was the beginning of my like, well, I guess I should develop a personal life, because the thing about me, I've always been the weird, shy, awkward kid. Just a lot of like needing to heal like social anxiety. And so here I am. It's funny. I finished the final draft of my book the same week that the deal went through. And one of the thoughts I had was like, oh my God, writing that book was harder than this deal. But then the second thought I had is like, this is the biggest check I've ever gotten. I have no one to call to like party with and hang out with. And I'm like, I guess this is the part where I should make friends. And so I don't know. It was bittersweet. It's just an intense and extreme experience. And you know how they say, like, I wouldn't wish early success on people. I get why people say that. I'm happy I had that early success, but I get why, because it's almost like you didn't get a chance really to earn it in the same way or appreciate perseverance in the same way. And that's how the internet is. It's just so fast. It just happens so fast. So here we are now.
Yeah, getting that kind of money at that age too, it must have just been like, holy shit, who am I? What do I do now? And even for me, when I stepped away and I was gonna sell my half of the company to Danielle, and that was all going through for say 6 months or whatever. In that 6 months, I had a full identity crisis. I was like, who am I without Boss Babe? Did you have any of that?
Yeah, like it felt like a ghost I couldn't get rid of. Like I'd be like, hi, I'm Alex. I'm into economics and philosophy. And they're like, Boss Babe. And I'm like, oh. And you know what's so funny, Natalie? I got to a point where I really did successfully stop being associated with it.
I know. I know. Your brand couldn't have looked more different.
Right,
I feel
right.
like you barely even mentioned it on your website. You were very private. And I never told your story. I never tried to tell your story. I never tried to talk about.
And I think that's why people feel like you erased me, but that's because I wanted to be erased.
Right.
And Natalie knew that more than anyone. And like you caught a lot of flack for that. And so shout out for you to you for being strong through that.
We can talk about the video, but I remember when that video went live and everyone was sending me it, and everything that I had wanted to like respond. And I remember just thinking, I'm not responding to something like that. If anyone's going to respond, I think it should be you. And I don't think that should be forced upon you to do that. Like, we were both so young to have videos like that come out. So for anyone that's not sure what we're talking about a year after I think the deal went through, there was a video when on YouTube about how I stole the company from you.
I don't know if I saw this.
You haven't seen the video?
No.
Oh, there's a full video, and then it was going around Instagram. It was a whole thing. The video, I mean, the narrative, you can imagine. It was this white woman stole this company from this black woman. She's erased her. Like, the narrative was very strong. And I remember just being in so much fear, like, I'm going to get canceled for this. But I never really wanted to come out and tell our story, because I felt like this is private. This is business.
Yeah.
Why should I have to explain, or why should you have to explain yourself?
I'm sorry that happened to you. Yeah, I hope that having this conversation, because yes, I agree that people are not entitled to know my literal business. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I'm happy we're having this conversation now, because it kind of clears up the air. And I just think you're a badass for being able to, I'm happy you didn't respond. And I want to say too, that for anyone who thinks they're defending me, because I think that's part of it too. And it's like, no, Natalie has helped me a lot. She changed my life. I changed your life. Yeah. And we're happy for it.
I mean, I do feel like our relationship's one of the most meaningful that I've ever had, in a sense of I wouldn't be doing this. I feel like you showed me and so many other women what was possible in early internet era, early social media. I mean, I remember the course that you put, Millennial Rich Girl, that was like an audio only course because like uploading videos was so freaking hard back then.
You're right.
Like the uploads, all of that stuff.
And there was no real course software either.
No. It was just audios, and like you can make a PDF to go alongside it, but it has to be a basic PDF because you can't upload a lot of things. So I do love that we're finally having this conversation. Was there ever a part of you that regretted doing the deal?
You know, I thought about that this morning, and no. Because one thing that I want to make sure everyone is clear on too is that I take responsibility, and I feel like there's credit due for me kind of inspiring the movement. And I see you more as like growing the company and transforming the company. And I think they're both amazing. I really do wish that there was some quantifiable data on how much the movement inspired women to start businesses, even just have the ovaries to put pink on their branding,
right?
Like, because that just wasn't a thing. And so for me, like what really gets me inspired and my why, which I realized this other day, even though I've been doing it for 10 years, is inspiring women to be themselves, but if they happen to be like a hyper feminine girly girl, even like a ghetto fabulous girl, which I feel like I am, that none of that should be hidden in your brand. None of that should be hidden in your professional setting, especially because I feel like what's so empowering about Bossbabe and the message behind it was like, if the competency is there, if the professionalism is there, if we can get the job done, then what difference does it make that I'm doing it in platform heels and pink velour?
Amen. So I think there is also some confusion that the girl boss movement was first.
Yeah,
let's talk about that.
Who was first? You know, being first is really not as glamorous as it seems because you're too early. I'm so early. Like, this conversation only sounds good because it's 10 years later.
Right. Isn't that? Oh my God, that blows my mind.
So here's how I see it. Girl Boss was a book that was like exciting because it was a story about this young female entrepreneur, woman entrepreneur who built her empire. But that's all it was. It was just a book. And so what happened was, the way I see it is like Bossbabe was a social and cultural movement. It existed even outside just the page. The trickle effect of the other pages helped kind of like create this whole thing, that pink and black. You know, it kind of reminds me of the Brat. You see how like Brat's, I feel like that's the Gen Z version. But there is this aesthetic, millennial pink, like that became an official term. And I'm like, okay.
I do think you created millennial pink.
I'm like,
let's be real about that.
I remember too. Do you remember when the page was checkered?
Yeah.
It was like checkered. Like no one was like experimenting with like grid aesthetic.
Wait, were you the first to check that?
I mean, I feel like if I say that, no one's going to believe me, but I swear to God,
no,
I was the first
I think you might actually be right. I mean, you started the word swag trend. You started the trend of putting an image and then you would lower the brightness on it and then put the text over it.
Yep.
I think you were.
I didn't see anyone do checker before me.
No, I don't think so. I think a lot of that was copied from the Bossbabe style.
Yeah. Another thing I think that's interesting when I look back on those original memes is that I didn't even put the account. I just put the hashtag. And that was another thing I remember is that there was like it was like 2 hashtags of like Bossbabe or like 3 or whatever. And then like over time, it was like it became 1 million like within that first like few years of people just hashtag Bossbabe. So that's another thing I'm proud that I did, because it's a sentiment again that I was more invested in this being like a kind of like a free movement where anyone could just take that hashtag and throw it on there, you know. And I felt like, okay, I'm making my print on the world and like my vision on the world.
Yeah, I remember that. I think by 2018 there was 20 million uses of the hashtag.
Yeah, I'm curious what is that now.
It's so hard to track now because I feel like hashtags aren't what they used to be. But that was probably at the peak, and that was 20 million and probably not including Twitter.
And then the other story I was telling about earlier is that I don't remember if it was the trademark office or the bank, but I remember getting a reaction like, oh, we've never had a hashtag like on a credit card before. I don't think I've seen a hashtag like trademark. So it was definitely one of the first. That was another thing, like that hashtag represented everybody. The hashtag made it the movement and the cultural influence, because that's how we could find each other, you know? And so I wanted to make sure it wasn't just Bossbabe. It was #Bossbabe.
Oh my God. Yeah. Now for anyone listening that's probably younger than us, they're probably thinking this is all so normal, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
Hashtags back then weren't normal. I mean, to own a hashtag, because you owned hashtag, it was fully trademarked. It's wild.
Yeah, it's cool.
Okay, I mean, there's so many more things I want to get to. So a big question that I have for you is, if you never sold it, where do you think it would be, or what do you think you would have done differently? Because I think you and I would have just run a completely different company.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to think about. So obviously the edge that I brought to Bossbabe was like this ghetto fabulous flair. That I think is what left when you came in, which is fine, and what a lot of people missed. Yeah. So I think that if I was still operating it, it would still have that. But the way I see it, and I was kind of hurt because, I mean, I'm telling you, the emotions people have about this brand.
No, I know. Trust me.
Like, people were betrayed. People felt like I had betrayed them. And it's so funny because I was kind of like, I'm sorry to disappoint you, but I'm not going to stay here just to make you happy. Right. I hope you would want that for me. But anyway, if I did have the same ambition you had and was like, you know what, I'm going to like scale this company and grow it up, it probably would still be a digital community of sorts, but it would just have like those pieces of me in it. But the reason why I said I got sad is because people were like, oh my God, you know, where'd you go? And I'm like, I'm right here at Alex Wolf. Like, I still do my thing and I still have my swag and do what I do. So I'm like, I didn't go anywhere.
Yeah. Why did you never come out and tell your story before this?
You know, honestly, it was the fanaticism that was like too much for me. Yeah. And when I say fanaticism, I mean like just the extremeness, because I'm telling you, it did get to a point. The side of the internet people don't talk about enough is the creepy DMs you get of like, I don't know how I'm going to survive. And I don't know this. And like, you're dealing with people who are dealing with like real mental issues. And so as much as I was honored that Bossbabe could be an inspiration for these women, as a 23-year-old, I'm over what I don't know how to respond appropriately. I don't know how to help you. And so that scared me. Like, again, it was an overwhelming experience to have that much kind of like what felt like control in a cultural conversation. So I'm like, what do you want from me?
Yeah, and I think now, or at least I have seen a bit of a change since 2020. I think now people are having a level of respect that like, just because someone has a following on Instagram and their DMs are open doesn't mean you can tell them your life story. But back then, I don't think that boundary was established because it was very new. Yeah. And you would find someone on the internet that you really related to. And that was like the beginning of influencers. Yeah. So I think that was also quite challenging back then, because I remember the DMs and they were intense. Yeah. Because I feel like people finally for once saw themselves in a movement or saw themselves in a brand. Yeah. And almost saw this as their way out. Yeah. And they wanted that from the brand. Yeah. And I remember that being quite intense.
Yeah, it was just intense. And I didn't want to fuel the fire. I was just like, maybe if I just take this money and look like over here.
Pretend it's not happening. Yeah. So the last 7 years for you then, how has that looked?
First of all, 7 years sounds crazy.
Crazy.
So what ended up happening is I got into the tech world. I was already kind of around it. And another thing about me is like, I'll think everyone is into it until I realize they're not. So I'm thinking everyone's into tech. I'm thinking everyone's thinking what I'm thinking in terms of like social media is a big deal. And so I started getting meetings at like Instagram, Snap, all the big guys, and going in there and, you know, there was an optimism like, oh, I'm going to help you guys. But then I realized how far away they were from understanding what their own apps were. Like Instagram didn't know what a creator was. I am not shitting you.
What?
No. Like I would go in there and I'd be like, okay, so do you know who this is? Do you know who that is? I'm like, these are like really popular people who have like a big stake in the cultural zeitgeist. Like, how come you don't know them? Like, what are you guys doing here?
That blows my mind.
Yeah. So I started to get really passionate about how do we design a more ethical, human-friendly social media place, like, or apps, behavior. Because the other thing that's happening that we didn't talk about is Instagram's changing. Now they're integrating stories. And because again, when I got on Instagram, it was a happy little square app. Like there were no videos. It was just squares. And so the landscape is shifting beneath our feet in terms of, well, where should we be now? And what kind of content should we post? And so I started doing consulting and bringing in ideas about how to just, design more ethically intentional internet behaviors. And that's kind of like what I'm known for now. So now I'm known as like the tech philosopher, award-winning, have brought these provocative ideas to the tech space. And that's how the 7 years have been.
And did you feel like you were really happy to kind of leave the Bossbabe identity behind? Yeah. Yeah, because I also always had the sense from you never had a big ego. Even when the Instagram account was taking off, like I remember once I'd moved over to America and I was kind of in and out on my student visas, you would always put me forward for the interviews. You would put me forward for the podcasts. Yeah. This was like early podcasts. Yeah. Did you never have your ego involved in that?
You know, I'm careful because anybody who says they don't have a big ego, run, because they're usually the scariest ones. I do have an ego, but I felt like it was more in alignment for you to take those meetings than for me. And like I said, I'm still figuring out who am I? What do I want to be known for? And I knew for a fact that Bossbabe was going to be a chapter and not like the main thing. So that's why I did that.
I think this is great for people to hear a positive acquisition story. Because I think there's just a lot of noise out there about all of this, gets to be really challenging, or you sell your company and, you completely have a crisis and you don't know who you are. Like there also gets to be positive stories here. And also you don't need to raise millions of dollars to bring in someone if you want to release control of your company. There's so many ways to do this. And I feel like the Silicon Valley playbook doesn't tell you that.
No. Yeah, no. They're still figuring out how to turn a profit over there. Yeah, no, like I said, I did take influence from that side. And I will say that the tech bros did teach me to dream big. Like I would send in little pitch decks and they'd be like, no, you should be thinking 10 times bigger. And I'm like, oh, really? Okay. And so that is helpful. But yeah, I've always been kind of like the free, artsy person kind of floating in and around Bossbabe. I feel like that's been my figure. But another thing I wanted to say is like as time would pass, and it still like gives me chills to see the original ones kind of like floating around randomly, like on Pinterest. Like I'll be scrolling through Pinterest like depressed.
Oh yeah.
And there'll be an old Bossbabe quote and I'm like, damn, I'm right. Like they still motivate me.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. But yeah, like the Who was reposting. So like when everybody was talking about Britney Spears a few years ago on her her documentary came out, and I went on her page and she had just posted like one of the old Bossbabe quotes. And like when I see stuff like that, I'm like, oh my God, like, because I'm a Britney fan. And that's that iconic level, is like knowing, like you said, people repost quotes because it's like I couldn't have said, like, this is basically what I'm trying to say. And so it's just really cool as a culture, like, I guess, stan or whatever. It's cool to see how other women who have been so influential in culture resonate and identify with the brand.
Oh, I mean, Britney, Madonna, all of the Kardashians. I mean,
I didn't know Madonna. I knew the Kardashians.
It's on Madonna's feet.
Oh, that's hilarious.
No, the quotes are everywhere.
My favorite too is Paris Hilton. Like I've been shopping some of her home care or homeware line. And I'm like, okay, do I want the Bossbabe mug? I'm like,
no, everything
who's
she
getting
does.
This money? Why am I not getting it?
Everything she does has Bossbabe on it. I don't understand how she's doing it.
I love it. It's just great.
I mean, I'm gonna just sit here and let it do it.
I know, it's worth it. Like just the idea of it just makes me so happy to know that that's what's happening.
And so what's next for you?
Okay, so back to this conversation about how I'm like more of a chairman investor type than entrepreneur type. So I got so sick of the tech space that I wanted to get off and just like start investing. And that looked like acquisitions, that looked like buying companies. So I decided to start a holding company and basically I'm looking for small businesses to purchase. And like my goal is to be like Warren Buffett in a mini skirt. That's what I tell people.
I love that.
And yeah, because, you know, I've spent the last 7 years, 10 years predicting trends. And I'm like, instead of like predicting them for everyone else, I might as well put this intel into my own company and investing. And like, I don't know, I have visions of like, okay, what could we do if like more women had more money? What do we want to build? What kind of companies and what kind of tech would we build? What would we be designing? And so that's what I'm really passionate about is like, how do I take the money and the wealth that could be generated through acquisitions, through a holding company, and then reinvest it in a way where women, you know, there's more women designed products, you know, online and offline, because that's something that just really inspires me. Like I threaded the other day, I want to say tweeted. I really can't stand how every social media platform has stolen each other's thing because they've diluted everything.
Well, do we even say tweeted now when it's X? Like, what do we say?
I X'd.
I can't handle this.
They don't care about us. They just do whatever they want. You know what's so funny too is Elon had that brand name for like ever. Like he
X?
Yes.
Did he?
He had X.com and like I think he tried to make it work for something else and they're like, oh, we don't like it. It sounds like porn. And then finally when he did the Twitter acquisition, he was like, oh, perfect time to use my creepy brand name.
Wait, on porn, I have a story for you.
Okay.
So wanted bossbabe.com forever.
Oh, like, yeah. I want to hear this.
Okay. So
because I know that was not easy.
Oh my God. So okay, wanted bossbabe.com. I mean, it was never available. Even when you wanted it, it was never available. Yeah. Never ever, right? And I'm like, who is the owner of bossbabe.com? So I would always go on these domain sites where you try and like broker the purchase and I would never hear back ever. And I think it was 2019. Stephen, my husband, says to me, what do you want for your birthday? And I said, I want bossbabe.com. Right? And he's a man that likes to make his wife happy. So he's like, okay. So he goes down this rabbit hole and he finds the owner of bossbabe.com. And it's this older woman, freaking iconic. And he gets all of her details. She's got to
be on the podcast next.
I know.
I need to know.
She's a member of the society.
Oh, I love it.
So she likes to be quite private though. He gets her contact details and he's like trying to broker the deal through email, all that stuff. And she says, I will do this on the phone. So he said, okay. Yeah. So we called her. The first phone call lasted 3 hours and he heard the whole history. She said in the 80s, she was like a total boss and she decided to call herself a boss babe and registered the domain.
Wow.
So she's
the original.
Right. So she didn't create a Boss Babe website. She never created a brand out of it. Yeah. But this website hosted her own personal brand. I won't say her name because she doesn't want to be private, but it would basically it was like about me.
I want to say I saw it. I want to say I saw it.
Yeah, pictures of me. Yeah. All of this. But like when we were looking for it at the time, like I guess she'd taken it down. This was like, she just had this. So anyway, he calls her and they're trying to do the deal. And he said, so what's it going to take to do the deal? And she said, I don't really care about the money. I want to be paid fairly for it, but I keep getting offered huge sums of money from porn companies. And I need your word that you will never turn bossbabe.com into a porn website or sell it to a porn company. And he gave her his word. They agreed on amount, bought it. Like he gave it to me for my birthday, but that's how it happened.
That is a good story. I feel like there needs to be a little Boss Babe museum.
I know.
Just like a little one. That would be so cute.
I wonder if we like do it on the website where we do Boss Babe through the ages, the timeline, and like show all the branding.
We should do that, but we should also do a museum because it would be so cute.
Can you do that? Because I'm tired.
I might. I have a few.
You
friends
do
I
it,
can call.
and then I can help.
I have a few friends I can call.
Okay, great. I'm just so tired.
But I love that story. That's such a great story. Well, yeah, I was trying to say that I threaded something, and it was, I want to say about how all the social media apps have copied each other to the point that everything's kind of diluted now. But I brought that up initially because that's another important contextual point for this story is like social media is changing. Like, oh my God, there just wasn't the same way you see podcasts now or gurus now or business experts now. Like, so much of that was still forming at the time. And if you were in that world like you were, it already felt like, wow, this is such a formed world.
Right.
We didn't know it was going to grow and grow. And I really feel like it's going to keep growing. And I'm like, oh my God, I was done with this in 2018. Like I wasn't expecting this to expand this much. So it's just crazy to see.
Yeah, I mean, I remember because I had a supplement company while I was also running Bossbabe with you. And I was like still a student. So I was still involved in university. And I said to one of my professors, I really think like of all the two companies, Bossbabe is the one that is going to be the biggest. And he was like, oh, I don't think so. I don't really feel like people are going to want to pay for a membership or courses like that. I think you should go all in on the supplement company. So even then, it like, yes, we believed in it, but the bigger outside world did not think people would pay for this. And especially from young women.
Yeah. And that happens a lot. And that's another reason why I get more passionate about investing, because I hear, the story of Etsy was, I forget her name, which makes me upset. But basically, when she tried to get funding, it was the same, who's going to want to buy homemade arts and crafts? Us? What are you talking about? So stories like that happen all the time where it's like, it makes so much sense to us. And I guess we just have to prove it over and over and over again.
I know. Like the world changes, but it doesn't change.
Yeah.
That's how I see it. So you've always been amazing with predictions. Can we talk about some of your predictions?
Well, look, I feel like I don't want to get too scary, but we're in a really amazing time for the simple fact that we have access to media that can access everyone. I don't know how long it's going to happen, because when I look at things like the election, just from a media literacy perspective, we got to a point, like you said, 10 years in tech is a lot. We got to a point where both candidates felt it was necessary to include podcasts and memes in the campaign, which is insane. So what does that tell me? Well, that tells me that, yeah, if you're not on here on a mic right now, it might be time to do so. And then I'm also kind of playing around with how I feel about like the personal brand being like the only brand, and how like we're moving away from like faceless. I'm careful because I feel like, yes, that does make sense. I do think like, especially as Gen Z starts to mature, the way they took in the media was primarily through these faces, and that they might not resonate or identify with corporate entities in the same way as they need that face. But then I also see nuanced kind of artists and fashion designers getting away with leaning into that mystery as part of the play. I do think it's a minority, but I like to leave room for that nuance. It's a great time to be silly and also like have proximity to, I want to say like hip hop culture. Here, let me explain myself. So I made a mini documentary in 2018 called Attention for Sale, and it was about how I was concerned that our attention spans were shrinking. This is another thing I'm noticing on Bossbabe. And as Instagram's taking over the world, I'm like, oh, we can't look at each other in the eyes. No one can focus. We got into the internet thinking we would grow out of it as kids. We're growing into it, right? Like the idea was like the internet was like a fun thing you did as a kid, and then one day you'll be a real grown up, right? Well, here we are. So part of what happens when the attention span shrinks is it's harder to get a conversation in the cultural zeitgeist because people are just distracted, and the appetite they've built has gone away from more serious things and into more trivial and cool things. And right now, what's cool is hip hop, and what's trivial is anything funny. And so those things, it's a good time, which luckily I'm funny and I'm into hip hop. Those things give you a higher chance of having your content distributed through the algorithm, which is like this big balance that we're all trying to figure out how to do. So those are some like trends, I guess, predictions. I think either way, brand is I'm bullish on, whether it be personal or corporate entity. Brands are really significant and only are becoming more so because people need meaning. The other issue with technology, anxiety shot through the roof, depression shot through the roof. Guess who over-indexed? Young girls. And, sadly, even suicide, right? So that tells me we have a meaning problem. We have a people don't feel like it's worth contributing and being their best selves problem. So brands have this unique opportunity to not just be a piggy bank to collect everyone's money, but to mean something bigger as a belief system and identity for a set group of people. Because what you're essentially making is a bank of price lists after you get the brand, because you can't compete with price. We have all the products that we need to live. We need products that make us want to live. That's the big switch. And that's why I get chills when I think of Bossbabe, because it was such a powerful brand and is. And it will live. It doesn't even necessarily need a certain company. It's just gonna live. It's an entity, it's a belief, it's a brand. And so that's what I mean when I say, like, I'm bullish on brand being the number one thing folks need to invest in to really stand out.
Oh, I love that. And it's so true. Like, when you think about all these categories that are just being redone and kind of redeveloped, people are just taking old stale brands and then making them relatable in some kind of way. And that's where everyone gravitates towards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What do you think about social media and the kind of state of creators and influence?
I like Threads because it's entertaining. It's a little addicting. They're going to be integrating ads, I heard, which makes sense. So we'll see how that changes the dynamic. I don't know. Nothing really feels stable anymore. Like, they're saying TikTok can be banned or taken away. And then Instagram, I think a lot of people haven't woken up to the fact that Instagram wants you to pay them to get your stuff distributed.
Right.
And people are like, oh, like, Instagram keeps telling me to buy a badge and buy ads. And I'm like, that's the business model, babe. Like, the days of just like, the thing about social media platforms, they need to hit a threshold of content density to really start being aggressive about the business model of it. Us as millennials who don't know what's going on, and Gen Z doesn't, and we're just like, well, we're here for the vibe. It's like, yeah, we're creating the vibe. We create the vibe, and then they put like paywalls on the vibe, and it's not really a vibe anymore. And I'm like, yeah, we're now 10 plus years in with Instagram. It's met the threshold, babe. Like, there's enough content now. So now if you really want it to circulate, you got to put some coin behind it. So it's just like the options feel, I mean, I don't know. Does anyone wake up like, I love social media? It's great.
Yeah, I know. I think you probably couldn't have predicted the level of burnout that would come from social media. And I especially think in this world of entrepreneurship and creators and influencers, there's one thing I think about a lot is there is no limit to the amount of work you can put in. There's no limit to the amount you can grow. There is no limit to the amount you can make. And that fuels work addiction in a way that I don't think has ever been seen before.
Yeah. And just the conversation behind, well, do you have a business infrastructure that you can at least use your content to promote?
Right.
Or are you using the infrastructure of this social media business, right? Basically the difference between products and services and views. What are you selling? And that was another thing, an issue that was coming up, because the rise of Bossbabe was also the rise of, I want to be an influencer. I want to be popular online and I want to get paid for the popularity. And that was something that I was having an issue with, because I've always been more team, don't sell views, sell a product or service, please, because you're going to burn yourself out. Even if you make it, okay, you're going to burn out and give up after. Like, the amount of YouTubers who actually met the threshold, who actually got the views and got paid from the views. If you look at Mr. Beast, he started selling his own shit. People started selling their own shit because it gives you more control, which is how a business is supposed to feel. What are these social media companies really here to do?
Oh, this is such a good point about not selling views. I feel like we need to just talk about this for a minute, because I completely agree. And a trend that I see is a creator will start something and it will become successful, so they'll start a business behind it. Then they stop creating and they start just doing things for views. That's where they burn out. And we've seen this so many times with people walking away from their businesses. And I constantly have to check myself on this, because I get told, create around this topic, put a hook like all the things.
Yeah.
And I'm like, if I'm not creating content that I actually enjoy, I can't be in this. A mentor of mine told me, he was like, as much as you love your team, you're going to be here at the end, not them. Yeah. So don't let social media or people dictate how you create, because if you want to be here, you're going to outlast them all, and you need to make sure you're running a race that you can actually run.
And that's why having a business that isn't selling views and having a brand really protects you from the current climate right now. Because like I said, even if you do succeed, which is very hard to do in selling those views, you're a moment. And then what if, you know how fickle people are? People are super fickle to these internet personalities, but they're less fickle to a brand because it's rooted in values as opposed to like whoever's the cute girl in the moment trying to sell me the makeup.
Oh, I love it. So coming full circle at the beginning, you said this movement came about because you really want to be famous.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
You got that very quickly. Do you still want that?
No. I mean, to your point, like I took a little and I was like, I'm good. But, you know, growing up, influenced by music videos, I don't know, I thought that's what you were supposed to be. You were supposed to be beautiful and famous, and like it's such like typical like unhealthy where's your parents like behavior. Like I'm thinking it's gonna solve everything. I'm just a lost girl. I was dealing with a eating disorder at the time.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was super anorexic. Like I would wake up in the morning, go on the scale, and if it didn't say 99, permission to just hate myself all day.
I did
really
not
bad.
know that.
Really bad. Yeah, and that was another thing is like I realized people didn't see what I saw when I saw Bossbabe. I saw a girl survive like trauma response to like pay bills. That's what I saw. And it took years of healing to be able to look at it and say, wow, that's what I can do at my freaking lowest. But at the time, you don't see it that way. So yeah, I wanted to be famous because I thought, because I had a hole in me. And like every other American girl, I thought fame and fortune were going to get rid of the hole.
And what did get rid of it?
Definitely healing, which for me just meant addressing shame that I was carrying that I didn't need to carry, wounds, parent wounds, just bullshit from childhood that kept me stuck in so many ways. So many ways. Like it's crazy how much healing through that elevates you. It's almost like you're walking around life with these spiritual anchors, and until you get it off of you, you're like, oh shit, I can like fly. So again, that's why looking at Bossbabe from that unhealed perspective was like, man, like nobody really cared for me. I had to get it from the mud, and you know, no one saw that I was anorexic. Like just all these thoughts of like, where was my protector? Why was I, why was I alone? Why was I like taking the market on by myself as a 22-year-old? Like it was just, but now I look back at it and I'm like, and I fucking killed it. So now that I'm healed, y'all should really watch out. But yeah, so yeah, I wanted fame.
And saying building something this big from being at your lowest point, yeah, I can only imagine what you're going to continue creating. Probably that was why so many people related to the brand, because it was real. There was real pain behind it, and we were all struggling, like in our own ways, right?
Yes.
But I think millennials in our early 20s, we were all really struggling to find our way in the world, and a lot of us grew up with really shitty backgrounds.
Yeah.
But we didn't know about healing. We didn't know about therapy. The internet was only just coming alive. Now gentle parenting, all this stuff.
Which I would like to give us credit for. Like millennials deserve credit for a few things. And one of them is integrating mental health as one of the healths. Because Gen X said, fuck that. They cared about the financial. I'm like, how's the mental, babe? So shout out to us for that. Anyway, keep going.
So true. But probably a lot of what you created from that place is why it was so impactful.
Yeah, I agree.
And if you were healed back then, it probably wouldn't have landed the same.
I agree. I think that young people, and in this case, women, that little vulnerable stage between 18 and like 20, let's call it 24, when you have to transition to an adult. And I have a lot of work on this as well in like the tech philosophy material, because I feel strongly that we don't really have rites of passage. Like we don't have like, and now you have proven that you are ready for adulthood. You know your strengths, you have support. Like, no, I don't know my strengths. I don't have support. I'm literally winging it on a growing internet that's out of control and about to change in a million ways every day. And so that lack of direction, and again, this is why I do see brands as so powerful, because they're almost like these matrices where that chaos makes sense. It's like, okay, I might not know what's going on out there, but I know when I'm here, and that's how it felt. It's like, I know these girls are also lost in the wilderness of capitalism, and they're like, okay, I don't know what's about to happen, but I'm not changing my shoes because of it. And that's what brought us together.
Yeah. And it makes me think too about not Gen Z, but the generation that comes after them, kind of
Alpha.
our kids, Alpha. They're gonna really deal with that with AI.
Ugh.
It's gonna be a whole new conversation. The way that we dealt with social media, they're growing up with AI and trying to find their feet with all of this.
We don't give ourselves a chance to exhale.
Yeah.
When has the exhale happened? It doesn't happen because the technology is invested in so rapidly out of fear, out of maybe male fear. I don't know. Because I'm just like, how do women do business like this? But that's how I feel. I just feel like, yeah, like we're just victims of like what, they want to do with the technology that integrates into the deepest level of our daily lives. And I have to just adjust. And before I even put a value judgment on that as good or bad, it's just like, whoa, that's kind of crazy.
Buckle up.
I've been trying. It's crazy. It's so hard. That's the best way of that's the best word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for doing this.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a long time coming, and I just feel honestly a bit of sense of relief to have it out there too.
Yes, I agree.
Do you feel like there's anything we didn't say?
I feel like we covered it all, and I'm just so grateful that we were able to have this conversation. And I want to just, again, thank you for being great. And I'm really impressed and inspired with what you built with my little trauma response. But also just so grateful for all the women who've supported me, Natalie, this movement. And yeah, I'm just so grateful.
Let's do this again in another couple of years and see where we are.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Seriously. And I just want to say, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you and what you created. And I am so grateful to you. You are such a meaningful person in my life, in my story. And really, I remember, you were a year younger than me, but I remember back then you pouring so much confidence into me too. Because I remember being like, what the fuck? What am I doing? And you're like, you can do it. You're fine. And you didn't micromanage me, and you let me fuck up. And I am very grateful to you. So thank you.
Oh, yeah.